How did God provide for the poor under the law of Moses? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Leviticus on Walking Through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Leviticus 19. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 10. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Leviticus 19, beginning of verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Do not turn to idols, nor make for yourselves molded gods. I am the Lord your God. And if you offer a sacrifice of a peace offering to the Lord, you shall offer it of your own free will. It shall be eaten the same day you offer it, and on the next day. And if it remains until the third day, it shall be burned in the fire. And if it is eaten at all on the third day, it is an abomination. It shall not be accepted. Therefore everyone who eats it shall bear his iniquity, because he has profaned the hallowed offering of the Lord. And that person shall be cut off from among his people. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not wholly reap of the corners of your field, neither shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. And you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. In chapter 18, we found different laws concerning morality that were given to Israel. There were certain familial sexual relationships that were banned, some of which had been practiced by the patriarchs in the book of Genesis. But it wasn't just familial sexual relationships that God banned. He banned some non-familial sexual relationships as well. A person couldn't marry two sisters, lest he created a rivalry among them. A person couldn't go and have sex with his neighbor's wife, for that was a form of stealing and banned directly in the Ten Commandments. One couldn't have sex with someone of the same sex, homosexuality, for that was an abomination before the Lord. One couldn't also have sex with any animal, bestiality, for that too was an abomination. These types of relationships were practiced by the nations that God was casting out of Canaan, and God considered it outright wickedness, and thus Israel wasn't to practice these, or the same thing would happen to them. Bible students know that Israel disobeyed God in regards to these things, and God did send them away into captivity. God was serious when it came to these laws and when it came to his people following his laws, a message that we as Christians today should remember. Sometimes today we can fool ourselves into thinking that there's the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament, and that these are either two different gods or a mellower God. Perhaps a mellower God because he is older than he was in the Old Testament, as if God, who is eternal, can age. Such is not the case. God was a God of law, faith, and grace in the Old Testament, and he is the same God in the New Testament. Yes, his covenant with us may be different, but he demands that we walk before him in faith by following his will. Then and only then will he provide his grace. Coming to chapter 19 now, we come across commandments that we have talked about in the past. While we might see them as mere repetition, I believe we miss the point of the chapter if we just skim it. There is a reason that God gave the laws that he did. It is because he is holy. He is not like the gods of the people of other nations. He is separate from them in that he is eternal and he is completely righteous. Thus he is worthy to be praised and worshipped. Israel was to be holy among the nations. Yes, they were to be righteous, but holiness also carries with it the meaning of separation. No other nation observed the Sabbath. Israel was to be separate and observe the Sabbath. Other nations didn't revere and treat their parents with respect, sometimes even going so far as to leave them destitute and in want. Israel was to be separate and not only obey their parents, but they were to revere them, respect them, which would include caring for them. Other nations served any god they felt like. In fact, they would even create new gods if they thought they needed to. Israel was to be separate. They were not to make any idols, but worship the one true God, Jehovah. Other nations would offer the sacrifices to their gods because they thought they had to in order to appease them. Israel was to be separate in that they were to offer their peace offerings to God willingly, and they were to eat of this sacrifice properly, following the commands contained in chapters 3 and 7. Other nations might not care for their poor that well, reaping all that they had sown to keep for themselves or sell in the marketplace. Israel was to be separate in that they were to love their neighbor and care for the poor. they were not to totally reap the corners of the field, nor gather the gleanings of the harvest, meaning that which was left behind or had fallen along the way. They were for the poor and for the foreigner in the land, in order that they may have something to eat. Some people accuse God of being cruel and unmerciful. This, of course, is an unjust charge, but even here we see God's mercy. Today we have social programs that are intended to help those who are in need. While yes, there are some who abuse those programs, seeking to mooch off of society instead of work, there are those who legitimately need them. And so we shouldn't begrudge those people who need them or make them feel ashamed for needing them. But even though we have these programs, doesn't release us from helping those in need. We are still to love and care for our neighbor. In the time of Moses, there was no welfare, no social security systems or pensions. Not having a job meant not having food. God desired to provide for the poor, though, and thus Israel was not to act like other nations. They were to be separate and ensure that the poor could eat too. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Leviticus 19, verses 11 to 19, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.